Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Hit the bell for new stories. Jacob's hands gripped the steering wheel tightly as the van roared down the empty street. His knuckles turned white, and his heart hammered in his chest. The black SUVs behind them moved with unnerving precision, their headlights bouncing off the van's rearview mirror like twin orbs of menace. "Who are they?" Jacob asked, glancing at Lyra as she clutched her side. "And why are they after you?" "They are agents of the Vanguard Coalition," Lyra replied, her voice strained but calm. "Their mission is to capture or destroy beings like me." "Beings like you? Are there more of you here?" "No," she said, shaking her head, her iridescent skin catching the dim light from the dashboard. "I am the only one on this planet. For now." Jacob swallowed hard, trying to focus on the road and her cryptic answers simultaneously. "And you just happened to show up in an old phone booth? Why there?" She hesitated, her luminous eyes scanning the road ahead. "It was not intentional. My escape pod malfunctioned and I landed in this area." The booth's metallic shielding provided temporary camouflage. "Temporary? They seem to find you anyway." Lyra winced and nodded. "They have advanced tracking technology. I was hoping to stay hidden long enough to recover." Jacob glanced at her side, where the strange wound pulsed faintly with light. "Recover from what? What happened to you?" Her gaze met his, and for a moment, Jacob felt the weight of her fear. "They attacked my ship. I barely escaped. The damage I sustained during my descent, it's worse than it looks." Before Jacob could respond, the rearview mirror flashed with a burst of blue light. The SUVs were closing the gap fast, their advanced weaponry humming ominously. One of the vehicles accelerated, swerving to the side in an attempt to overtake them. "Oh, great," Jacob muttered. "Hold on." He yanked the wheel hard, veering the van onto a narrow alleyway between two rows of abandoned warehouses. The van skidded, nearly scraping the brick wall, but he managed to keep it steady. The SUVs weren't as nimble. One swerved too wide and slammed into a dumpster, sending a metallic crash echoing into the night. "Good driving," Lyra said, her voice tinged with gratitude. "But they won't stop." "No kidding," Jacob said, his tone tense. "Do you have any tricks up your sleeve? Something alien and useful?" She hesitated, then reached into the shimmering fabric that wrapped around her like a cloak. From within, she produced a small device no larger than a deck of cards. It pulsed with a soft, blue glow. "What is that?" Jacob asked. "A phase disruptor," she said. "It can temporarily disable their vehicles, but it requires proximity." "Proximity?" Jacob barked. "You mean we have to get closer to those lunatics?" "Yes," Lyra said simply. "But I will handle it. Focus on driving." Before Jacob could protest, Lyra opened the passenger door slightly, the wind whipping her shimmering cloak around her. She extended the device out of the van and aimed it backward. Jacob caught a glimpse of her fingers moving delicately over the surface of the gadget, as though playing an invisible harp. A pulse of light shot out from the device, spiraling like a beam of liquid energy. It struck one of the pursuing SUVs, and the vehicle immediately veered off course, its engine sputtering and lights flickering before it crashed into a row of abandoned cars. "That was incredible," Jacob said, his voice tinged with awe. Lyra didn't respond. Her breathing was labored, and she slumped back into the seat, the device slipping from her fingers. Jacob caught it before it hit the floor. "Hey, stay with me," he said, glancing at her. "You don't look so good." "I need rest," she whispered. "Using my energy takes its toll." Jacob cursed under his breath. "Okay, first things first, we need a place to lay low." He turned onto another side street, his mind racing. His apartment wasn't an option. The Vanguard Coalition clearly had resources beyond anything he could comprehend, and they would probably track him down within minutes. Then, it hit him, Hank's garage. Hank was an old friend of Jacob's. A grizzled mechanic with a conspiracy theorist streak, Hank was the kind of guy who believed the government had aliens locked up in underground bunkers. If anyone would believe Jacob's story, or at least not report him, it was Hank. The garage was located on the outskirts of town, nestled among a cluster of long-forgotten factories. Jacob pulled into the gravel lot and killed the engine. He stepped out of the van and ran to the passenger side, gently helping Lyra out. "What is this place?" she asked weakly. "A safe haven," Jacob said. "For now." He banged on the garage door, the sound echoing into the quiet night. After a tense few moments, the door creaked open, and a bearded man with oil-streaked hands stepped out. Hank squinted at Jacob, then at Lyra, his expression shifting from annoyance to confusion. "Jacob, what the hell is going on?" Hank asked. "And, who, or what, is that?" "No time to explain," Jacob said. "We're in serious trouble, Hank. Can we come in?" Hank hesitated, his gaze lingering on Lyra, then nodded. "Yeah, sure. But you owe me an explanation." Jacob guided Lyra inside, laying her down on an old cot in the corner. The garage was a chaotic mess of tools, spare parts, and half-disassembled vehicles. The smell of oil and metal filled the air. As Jacob tried to catch his breath, Hank crossed his arms. "All right, start talking. Who is she? And why does she look like that?" "She's an alien," Jacob said bluntly. "Her name's Lyra, and she's being hunted by some kind of intergalactic task force or something." Hank's eyes widened, but instead of disbelief, a glimmer of excitement crossed his face. "Aliens? On Earth? I knew it. I freaking knew it. This isn't a joke, Hank," Jacob snapped. "These people, things, whatever, they're dangerous. They're after her, and now they'll be after me too." Hank's grin faded. All right. Let me think." He rubbed his chin, glancing at Lyra. "She doesn't look so good. Is she gonna make it?" "I don't know," Jacob admitted. "She said she needs rest. I think that pulse thing she used to stop the SUV drained her." Hank nodded thoughtfully. "All right. I've got some supplies. Let's get her patched up. In the meantime, I'll rig something to throw those bastards off your trail." Jacob exhaled, relief washing over him. For now, they had a chance to regroup. But he knew it was only a matter of time before the vanguard found them again. And when they did, they'd have to be ready. Lyra drifted in and out of consciousness as Jacob and Hank worked to stabilize her. Jacob wrapped her wound with clean gauze, but the strange iridescent fluid continued to seep through, defying their efforts. "I've seen a lot of weird things," Hank muttered as he rummaged through a pile of tools. "But this? This takes the cake. What is she, some kind of alien queen? Galactic fugitive? Interstellar tourist?" Jacob shot him a look. "She's a scientist, apparently. And I don't think she came here by choice." "Scientist, huh?" Hank said, raising an eyebrow. "Well, she's lucky you stumbled across her. Most people would have called the cops, or worse." "Yeah, well, now I'm stuck in the middle of this mess," Jacob said, his frustration creeping into his voice. "Those Vanguard guys are serious business. If they catch her, or us, it's game over." Hank grunted and held up a piece of equipment that looked like a hybrid between a car battery and a makeshift EMP generator. "This might buy us some time. I rigged it to scramble their tracking tech. Won't last long, but it should keep them off your tail for now." Jacob nodded. "Thanks, Hank. But what's the plan after that? We can't just keep running." "You're asking the wrong guy," Hank said, gesturing toward Lyra. "She's the one with all the answers." Jacob looked at her, still pale and motionless on the cot. For the first time, he noticed the faint, intricate patterns on her skin glowing and dimming in rhythmic pulses. It was mesmerizing, almost hypnotic. "What's happening to her?" Jacob asked. "Maybe she's healing," Hank offered. "Or maybe she's powering down. Hell if I know." Before Jacob could reply, the faint hum of engines reached their ears. He froze, his eyes darting to the garage door. Hank cursed under his breath, rushing to switch off the lights. "Sounds like your friends found us," Hank said. "They're not my friends," Jacob snapped, grabbing a wrench off the workbench. It was a pathetic weapon against whatever advanced tech the Vanguard had, but it was better than nothing. The hum grew louder, accompanied by the sharp whine of drones. Jacob peered through a crack in the garage door and saw a fleet of hovering machines scanning the area with beams of blue light. Moments later, the black SUVs pulled into the lot, their headlights cutting through the darkness. "They're here," Jacob whispered, his heart pounding. Hank joined him at the door, his face grim. "We're not getting out of this without a fight." Jacob glanced at Lyra. She was still unconscious, her breathing shallow but steady. He knew they couldn't leave her behind, but the odds of escaping seemed slim. Then, an idea struck him. "Hank," he said, his voice low. "Do you have any distractions? Something to draw their attention?" Hank grinned. "Do I? You're talking to the king of improvised chaos." He rushed to the back of the garage and returned with a small device that looked like a cross between a remote control and a firecracker. "What's that?" Jacob asked. "Homemade decoy," Hank said, pressing a button. "It'll give them something to chase." The device beeped, and Hank tossed it out through a side window. Moments later, it erupted into a burst of light and sound, mimicking the energy signature of Lyra's disruptor. The drones immediately shifted their focus, converging on the decoy. "Now's our chance," Hank said. "Let's move." Jacob hoisted Lyra into his arms, her limp form lighter than he expected. Together, they slipped out through a back door, keeping low to avoid the sweeping beams of the drones. The night was cold and quiet, save for the distant whir of engines. Jacob's van was parked nearby, hidden under a tarp. As they approached, Lyra stirred in his arms, her eyes fluttering open. "Jacob," she murmured, her voice weak but urgent. "You need to leave me." "Not happening," Jacob said firmly. "We're getting out of here together." "You don't understand," she said, her luminous eyes locking onto his. "They will not stop. If you stay with me, they will kill you. And if I leave you, they'll kill you," Jacob countered. "I'm not abandoning you, Lyra. Now save your strength." She seemed too weak to argue further, resting her head against his shoulder. Hank pulled back the tarp covering the van and jumped into the driver's seat. "Get in," he hissed. "We've got about 2 minutes before they realize the decoy's a dud." Jacob slid into the passenger seat, cradling Lyra in his lap. The van roared to life, and Hank hit the gas, barreling down a dirt road that led away from the garage. "Where are we going?" Jacob asked. "Somewhere they won't think to look," Hank said. "I've got a few hideouts around town. We'll regroup and figure out our next move." As they drove, Jacob glanced out the window and saw the drones scattering in different directions. One of them veered dangerously close to their van, its glowing blue eye scanning the area. "Hang on," Hank muttered, swerving sharply. The drone missed them by inches, its searchlight sweeping past the van without locking on. "Close call," Jacob said, exhaling in relief. "Too close," Hank replied. "They're getting smarter. We need to figure out a way to take them out for good." Lyra stirred again, her voice faint. "The disruptor, it can disable their systems, but it needs modification." "Modification?" Hank asked, glancing at her in the rearview mirror. "What kind of modification?" "Stronger output, larger range," she said, her words coming slowly. It's possible, but requires components. Jacob frowned. What kind of components? Rare metals, she said, her eyes closing again. Electromagnetic amplifiers. Earth tech might suffice. Earth tech, huh? Hank said, a spark of excitement in his voice. Lucky for you, I've got a stash of spare parts that might do the trick. Jacob looked at him skeptically. You've got alien-grade tech lying around? Not exactly, Hank admitted. But I've got enough junk to build just about anything. If she can guide us, we might stand a chance. Jacob glanced down at Lyra, her breathing steady but shallow. He felt a strange sense of responsibility for her, a mix of protectiveness and determination. Whatever it took, he was going to keep her safe, and if that meant taking on the Vanguard coalition, so be it. All right, he said. Let's do it. Hank grinned. Now you're talking. As the van disappeared into the night, the Vanguard regrouped at the empty garage, their leader stepping out of one of the SUVs. He surveyed the area with cold, calculating eyes, then turned to his subordinates. They won't get far, he said, his voice low and menacing. Deploy the trackers. I want them alive. The stage was set. Jacob, Hank, and Lyra were on the run, their bond growing stronger as they worked together to outwit their relentless pursuers. But the Vanguard wasn't giving up, and the stakes were higher than ever. The battle for survival had only just begun. Hank's hideout wasn't much to look at, a forgotten storage unit on the outskirts of town. The steel walls were cold, the air smelled faintly of oil and rust, and the only light came from a flickering fluorescent bulb. But it was safe, for now. The Vanguard drones weren't anywhere near, and the silence was almost comforting. Jacob carried Lyra inside, laying her gently on an old workbench that Hank had cleared off. She was pale, her glowing patterns dimmer than before, and her breathing was labored. She doesn't look good, Jacob muttered, worry etched on his face. She's hanging on, Hank said, pulling out a battered toolbox. If she says she can fix that gizmo and zap those Vanguard guys, we're giving her the tools to do it. Lyra stirred, her glowing eyes fluttering open. I can help, she said weakly. But I'll need your assistance, both of you. Jacob crouched beside her. We're in this together, Lyra. Just tell us what to do. She nodded, her strength returning slightly. The disruptor I used, its range is too limited. We need to amplify it to disable the Vanguard's tracking systems and drones across a wider area. Hank scratched his beard. Amplify it how? You're talking about tech that's light years ahead of anything we've got here. Not necessarily, Lyra said, sitting up with some effort. Earth's technology, though primitive, can be adapted. I'll need copper wiring, rare earth magnets, and a power source capable of delivering a high-energy burst. Hank smirked. Copper wiring and magnets? That's child's play. Power source might be tricky, though. Jacob crossed his arms. Can we use a car battery? Lyra shook her head. Not enough output. Something more potent. Hank's eyes lit up. I've got an old generator stashed in the back. It's not exactly top of the line, but it might do the trick if we tweak it. Lyra managed a faint smile. Then we have a chance. The assembly. For the next several hours, the trio worked tirelessly. Hank scavenged his stash for materials, muttering to himself as he pieced together components from broken appliances and discarded tools. Jacob followed Lyra's instructions, carefully attaching wires and assembling parts of the disruptor's casing. Lyra, though weak, guided them with precision, her knowledge of technology far beyond anything they'd ever encountered. Careful, she said as Jacob soldered two wires together. The alignment must be exact, or the energy surge will destabilize. Jacob wiped sweat from his brow. Got it. No pressure or anything. Hank chuckled from across the room. Don't fry yourself, kid. I'd hate to explain to your mom why her son turned into a human light bulb. Jacob rolled his eyes but kept working. The pieces slowly came together, the disruptor transforming into something far more complex and powerful than it had been before. Its metallic surface pulsed faintly with a blue light, a sign that it was operational. How will this work once it's ready? Jacob asked. Lyra leaned against the workbench, her strength returning bit by bit. Once activated, the disruptor will emit a phased pulse across a wide radius. It will temporarily disable all electronic systems tuned to the Vanguard's frequencies, drones, trackers, even their vehicles. And how long is temporarily? Hank asked. Approximately 10 minutes, Lyra said. It's not long, but it will give us a chance to escape or strike back. Jacob frowned. Strike back? You mean fight them? We may not have a choice, Lyra said, her tone serious. The Vanguard will not stop until they capture me. And if they succeed, Earth will face consequences far worse than you can imagine. Jacob exchanged a glance with Hank. The weight of her words sank in, heavy and foreboding. The Vanguard closes in. Outside the storage unit, the night had grown colder, and the distant hum of engines signaled the Vanguard's approach. The drones were back, sweeping the area with their eerie blue lights. Lyra's faint glow grew brighter as her body seemed to sense the danger. They're close, she said, her voice tense. Jacob peeked through a crack in the steel door. A squad of black SUVs had pulled into the area, their sleek forms gleaming under the moonlight. Vanguard agents disembarked, their movements precise and coordinated. A swarm of drones hovered overhead, their lights casting ghostly beams across the ground. We're out of time, Jacob said. Lyra, is the disruptor ready? It's functional, she said, but we need to deploy it from a central position to maximize its range. Central position? Hank said, frowning. This isn't exactly the middle of town. There's a radio tower nearby, Lyra said. It would amplify the pulse significantly. If we can get there. Jacob cut her off. Getting there isn't the problem. Getting there alive is. Hank slapped the side of the generator, which they had rigged to power the disruptor. This thing isn't exactly portable, either. It'll slow us down. Lyra's eyes narrowed, glowing with determination. Then we make a stand here. We deploy the disruptor and hold them off until the pulse activates. Jacob's stomach sank. Hold them off. With what? Wrenches and duct tape. Hank smirked. Speak for yourself, kid. He opened a locker, revealing an array of improvised weapons, modified nail guns, a flamethrower rigged from an old propane tank, and a handful of homemade explosives. Jacob blinked. Why do you even have these? Hank shrugged. What can I say? I like to be prepared. Lyra touched Jacob's arm. We have no other option. If we fail, they will find me, and this planet will suffer. Her words left no room for argument. Jacob nodded, his resolve hardening. All right. Let's do this. The final countdown. The Vanguard's forces converged on the storage unit, their drones circling overhead like vultures. Inside, Jacob, Hank, and Lyra prepared for the fight of their lives. Hank positioned the disruptor in the center of the unit, connecting it to the generator and securing it with metal clamps. Lyra adjusted the device, her glowing fingers moving with precision. Once activated, the pulse will take 2 minutes to charge. During that time, we must hold our ground. 2 minutes. Jacob said, grabbing one of Hank's makeshift weapons. We'll be lucky to last 30 seconds. Have a little faith, kid, Hank said, lighting the pilot flame on his flamethrower. This old man still got a few tricks up his sleeve. The first wave came quickly. The storage unit's doors rattled as Vanguard agents attempted to breach them. Jacob and Hank took up positions on either side, ready to defend. Lyra knelt by the disruptor, her eyes fixed on its glowing core. "Here they come," Jacob muttered, gripping his weapon tightly. The doors burst open, and chaos erupted. The stage is set for an epic battle as Jacob, Hank, and Lyra face off against the Vanguard in a desperate bid to activate the disruptor. The tension mounts as the clock ticks down, and the trio must rely on their courage, ingenuity, and newfound alliance to survive. The storage unit's metal doors exploded inward with a deafening crash. Vanguard agents poured in, their black uniforms and advanced weaponry gleaming under the flickering fluorescent light. Jacob barely had time to react, diving behind a stack of crates as a volley of energy bolts scorched the air above him. "Stay low," Hank barked, stepping forward with his flamethrower. A gout of fire roared from the nozzle, forcing the agents to scatter. The flames reflected off their visors, but their movements remained calm and calculated, machines in human form. "Lyra, how much longer?" Jacob shouted over the chaos. Lyra was crouched over the disruptor, her glowing fingers flying across the device's surface. "The charge cycle is at 40%. Keep them back." Jacob swallowed hard and peeked around the crate. One of the agents was advancing, his weapon trained on Hank. Thinking fast, Jacob grabbed a wrench from the floor and hurled it with all his might. The heavy tool struck the agent's helmet with a loud clang, momentarily disorienting him. "Nice throw, kid," Hank yelled, unleashing another blast of fire. "But they're not gonna stay confused for long." The drones joined the fray, descending from the ceiling like a swarm of angry hornets. Their searchlights cut through the smoke, illuminating every corner of the storage unit. One locked onto Jacob, its mechanical eye glowing an ominous blue. "Not today," Jacob muttered, grabbing Hank's modified nail gun. He squeezed the trigger, sending a flurry of sharp projectiles into the drone. Sparks erupted as it crashed to the ground in a heap of twisted metal. "Jacob, above you." Lyra's warning came just in time. Jacob looked up to see another drone descending rapidly, its energy weapon charging. He dove out of the way, narrowly avoiding a searing beam that left a scorch mark on the floor. The battle was chaotic and relentless. Hank moved with surprising agility for his age, his flamethrower keeping the Vanguard agents at bay. Jacob darted between cover, using whatever tools he could find to fight back. Lyra stayed focused on the disruptor, her glowing patterns pulsing in sync with the device's charge cycle. 60%. Lyra called out. "We're getting close." The Vanguard's tactics. The Vanguard agents began to adapt, coordinating their movements with unsettling precision. Two agents flanked Hank, one drawing his fire while the other circled around to attack. Jacob saw the ambush unfolding and sprinted toward Hank, tackling the second agent before he could fire. "Watch your back," Jacob shouted. Hank nodded grimly. "Appreciate it. Now let's even the odds." He reached into his bag of tricks and pulled out one of his homemade explosives. With a wicked grin, he lobbed it toward the advancing agents. The small device detonated with a thunderous boom, sending shockwaves through the storage unit. The Vanguard agents were thrown off balance, giving the trio a brief respite. "Jacob, over here." Lyra's voice cut through the smoke and noise. He turned to see her gesturing frantically. "I need your help." Jacob scrambled to her side, ducking under another drone's beam. "What do you need?" "The disruptor is overloading," Lyra said, her voice tight with urgency. "I need you to stabilize the power conduit while I recalibrate." Jacob's hands shook as he grabbed the tools Lyra handed him. "I don't even know what I'm doing." "Follow my instructions," she said calmly, despite the chaos around them. "Trust me." He nodded and got to work, tightening bolts and reconnecting wires under her guidance. The disruptor hummed loudly, its light intensifying. Jacob could feel the energy radiating from it, like standing too close to a lightning storm. 80%, Lyra said. "We're almost there. The final push." Outside, the Vanguard's reinforcements arrived, another SUV and a fresh swarm of drones. The new arrivals wasted no time, their weapons tearing through the storage unit's walls like paper. The trio was running out of time. "Hank, we've got more company," Jacob shouted. "Yeah, I noticed," Hank replied, his voice strained. He was pinned behind an overturned table, his flamethrower's fuel running dangerously low. "I'm almost out of juice here." Lyra looked up from the disruptor, her expression grim. "We need to activate it now." "But it's not fully charged," Jacob protested. "If we wait any longer, we won't survive to see it finish," she said firmly. "Jacob, trust me." Jacob hesitated for only a moment before nodding. "Do it." Lyra placed her hand on the disruptor's core, her glowing patterns flaring brighter than ever. The device emitted a high-pitched whine, building to a crescendo as she channeled her energy into it. "Everyone, get down," she shouted. Jacob and Hank hit the floor just as the disruptor unleashed its pulse. A wave of blue energy rippled outward, passing through the walls of the storage unit and into the surrounding area. The drones immediately dropped from the air, their circuits fried. The Vanguard agents' weapons powered down, their lights flickering before going dark. For a moment, everything was still. Escape. Jacob slowly got to his feet, his ears ringing. The storage unit was filled with smoke and the scent of scorched metal. The Vanguard agents were still conscious but disoriented, struggling to regroup. "We've got to move," Lyra said, her voice weak but determined. "The pulse won't disable them for long." Jacob helped her to her feet while Hank grabbed what little equipment he could salvage. Together, they slipped out the back of the storage unit and into the night. The radio tower Lyra had mentioned loomed in the distance, its blinking red light a beacon in the darkness. It was their next destination, a place to regroup and plan their next move. Aftermath. As they drove away in the battered van, Lyra slumped against the seat, her glowing patterns dim once more. "Thank you," she said softly. "You saved my life." "We're not out of the woods yet," Jacob said, glancing at her. "But we'll get through this. Together." Hank grunted from the driver's seat. "I hope you've got another trick up your sleeve, lady. Something tells me the Vanguard's not gonna let this slide." "They won't," Lyra admitted. "But we've bought ourselves time. And time is all we need." The van disappeared into the shadows, leaving behind the wreckage of the storage unit and the smoldering remains of the Vanguard's assault. The battle wasn't over, but for the first time, Jacob felt a spark of hope. Together, they had a chance to fight back, and maybe, just maybe, to win. The van rattled as Hank steered it off the main road and onto a dirt path leading toward the distant radio tower. The red blinking light loomed above the treetops like a watchful eye, guiding them toward what felt like their last refuge. Jacob sat in the back beside Lyra, who was leaning against the wall of the van, her patterns flickering faintly. "You doing okay?" Jacob asked, his voice low. "I'll recover," Lyra replied, her voice soft but steady. "The disruptor's activation drained me. My energy reserves, they're not limitless." Jacob frowned, watching her carefully. He couldn't shake the growing unease gnawing at him. This wasn't just about Lyra anymore. The Vanguard, their relentless pursuit, the advanced technology, they were part of something far bigger, and Jacob wasn't sure they were ready for it. "So," Hank said from the driver's seat, breaking the silence, "now that we've had a little breather, how about you tell us the whole truth? What's the Vanguard really after? And why are they so desperate to catch you?" Lyra hesitated, her glowing eyes meeting Jacob's. He could see the weight of the answer in her expression, as if she'd been carrying this secret alone for too long. "The Vanguard isn't just hunting me," she began. "They're here for Earth." Jacob felt his chest tighten. "What do you mean, here for Earth?" "They're part of a coalition," Lyra continued, her voice tinged with bitterness. Their mission is to identify and exploit planets with untapped potential, resources, technologies, even species. Earth is a prime target, but humanity isn't ready for direct contact. You're still too divided, too focused on yourselves to resist them. So they're using you as a test case? Hank asked, his hands tightening on the steering wheel. Lyra nodded. My people, we've been monitoring the Vanguard for centuries, trying to counter their operations. When I learned they were targeting Earth, I volunteered to intercept. My mission was to stop them before they could establish a foothold. Jacob's mind raced. But you said there's something worse. Something about parasites? Lyra's patterns flared briefly. Yes. The Vanguard doesn't just take what they want, they leave something behind. A biological weapon, a parasite designed to spread and subjugate entire populations. It's how they maintain control without outright war. Hank let out a low whistle. So, what? They drop these parasites and turn people into, what? Zombies? Not zombies, Lyra said. But hosts. The parasites take over neural functions, creating a hive mind loyal to the Vanguard. On my homeworld, we call it the Veil. Once it takes root, it's nearly impossible to eradicate. Jacob's stomach churned. And they're planning to use this on Earth? They've already started, Lyra said grimly. I've detected traces of the Veil in isolated areas. Small populations, rural towns, places that won't raise suspicion until it's too late. The van fell into an uneasy silence. Jacob stared out the window, his mind reeling. The Vanguard wasn't just hunting Lyra, they were waging a silent war against humanity, and no one even knew it. Arrival at the radio tower. The van jolted to a stop as they reached the base of the radio tower. It was an imposing structure, its skeletal frame reaching high into the night sky. The surrounding area was deserted, save for the faint hum of the tower's machinery. This place gives me the creeps, Hank muttered as he killed the engine. It's perfect, Lyra said, stepping out of the van. She seemed steadier now, her patterns glowing faintly as if the proximity to the tower energized her. The tower's transmission array will amplify the disruptor's range exponentially. If we can deploy it here, we can disable every Vanguard system in a 100-mile radius. Jacob grabbed the disruptor from the van, careful not to jostle its fragile components. How long will it take to set up? Not long, Lyra replied. But once we activate it, the Vanguard will know. They'll come for us. Great, Hank said, slinging his flamethrower over his shoulder. Another day, another fight. The trio climbed the narrow staircase leading to the tower's control platform. The wind whipped around them as they reached the top, the blinking red light casting eerie shadows across their faces. Lyra knelt beside the tower's main console, her glowing fingers dancing over the controls. This will work, she said, her voice firm. We just need to buy enough time for the disruptor to fully integrate with the tower's system. Jacob looked out over the horizon. In the distance, faint lights moved steadily toward them. His heart sank. They're already here. The Vanguard strikes. The first wave came swiftly. Vanguard drones zipped through the air, their searchlights piercing the darkness. Jacob and Hank scrambled to defend the tower, using makeshift barricades and Hank's arsenal of improvised weapons. Watch your left. Hank shouted as a drone swooped low, its energy weapon charging. Jacob fired a nail gun at it, sending a shower of sparks cascading into the night. We can't keep this up forever. Jacob yelled, ducking behind a steel beam. We don't have to. Lyra called back from the console. The disruptor's integration is at 60%. Just hold them off a little longer. The drones were relentless, their movements faster and more coordinated than before. Hank hurled another homemade explosive, taking out 2 drones at once, but the victory was short-lived. More agents arrived, scaling the tower's staircase with precision. Jacob swung a wrench at the nearest agent, knocking his weapon out of his hands. The agent responded with a swift, mechanical strike, sending Jacob sprawling. Before the agent could finish him off, Lyra appeared, her glowing hands radiating energy. She unleashed a pulse that sent the agent tumbling down the staircase. "Thanks," Jacob gasped, scrambling to his feet. "Stay focused," Lyra said, her voice calm but firm. "We're almost there." A desperate gamble. As the vanguard forces closed in, Lyra's calm facade began to crack. The disruptor was at 90%, but the tower was under siege. Hank's flamethrower sputtered, its fuel finally depleted, and Jacob's improvised weapons were running low. "Lyra, it's now or never," Jacob shouted. "I need 10 more seconds," she replied, frantically adjusting the console. Hank gritted his teeth and charged the staircase, using sheer force to push back the agents. "You heard the lady. 10 seconds." The disruptor emitted a loud hum, its light intensifying. Lyra stepped back, her patterns glowing brighter than ever. "It's ready. Activating now." She slammed her hand onto the console, and the disruptor unleashed a blinding wave of energy. The pulse radiated outward, sweeping across the tower and into the surrounding landscape. Drones fell from the sky, their circuits fried. Vanguard agents collapsed, their weapons powerless. For a moment, there was silence. Then, the hum of the disruptor faded, leaving only the sound of the wind. The revelation. Jacob and Hank slumped against the railing, their breaths coming in ragged gasps. Lyra stood at the console, her glowing patterns dim but steady. "It's done," she said softly. "The Vanguard systems in this area are offline." Jacob managed a weak smile. "We did it." But Lyra's expression remained somber. "This is only the beginning. The Vanguard will regroup, and they'll send reinforcements. We need to take this fight to the next level." Hank chuckled darkly. "You mean this wasn't the next level?" "No," Lyra said, her gaze distant. "This was just survival. The real fight is still ahead." As the first rays of dawn broke over the horizon, Jacob felt a strange mix of relief and dread. They had won a battle, but the war was far from over. And for the first time, he understood the stakes not just for Lyra, but for all of humanity. The cold morning light did little to lift the mood as the trio regrouped near the tower's base. Their victory against the Vanguard had bought them time, but the weight of Lyra's revelation loomed over them like a storm cloud. "We can't keep running," Jacob said, pacing near the van. "They'll just come back stronger. We need to stop them at the source." Hank leaned against the van, arms crossed. "And how exactly do you propose we do that, genius? It's not like they handed us a map to their headquarters." Lyra, seated on a rock nearby, looked up. "We don't need a map. I know where their primary Earth base is located." Jacob and Hank turned to her, both startled. "You do?" Jacob asked. "Why didn't you say something earlier?" "I wasn't sure we'd survive this long," Lyra admitted. "But now, there's a chance. The Vanguard's base isn't just a command center, it's where they're synthesizing the Veil parasites. If we can destroy it, we can cripple their operation here." Hank raised an eyebrow. "And by destroy, you mean what? Walk in with a couple of wrenches and hope for the best?" "No," Lyra said, her glowing patterns brightening slightly. "We need to infiltrate, gather evidence of their plans, and sabotage the production facility. If we do it right, we can delay their reinforcements and expose their activities to the world." Jacob exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck. "So, no pressure." Lyra stood, her gaze steady. "I can guide us inside. But this will be the most dangerous thing we've ever done. If we're caught, there will be no escape." The approach. Lyra directed them toward a remote desert region miles away. The landscape grew barren and lifeless as they traveled, the van kicking up clouds of dust on the desolate road. Eventually, a nondescript building came into view, one old industrial warehouse that seemed abandoned. "That's it?" Hank asked, squinting at the structure. "Doesn't look like much." "It's a facade," Lyra explained. "The real base is underground. The warehouse serves as an access point." Jacob pulled the van to a stop a safe distance away, scanning the area. "I don't see any guards." "They'll be there," Lyra said. "The vanguard relies on stealth. Their security systems are advanced and nearly invisible." "Nearly?" Hank repeated. "Great. That sounds promising." Lyra held up a small Devia handheld scanner she'd salvaged from the disruptor. "This will help us bypass their surveillance grid. But we'll need to move carefully." The trio exited the van, crouching low as they approached the warehouse. Lyra's scanner emitted soft beeps, guiding them through a safe path around the perimeter. At the back of the building, they found an access panel hidden beneath a layer of rust and dirt. "This is it," Lyra said, prying the panel open. Inside was a keypad glowing faintly with alien symbols. Hank frowned. "Let me guess, you've got the magic password." Lyra placed her hand over the keypad. Her glowing patterns pulsed in sync with the device, and after a tense moment, the panel emitted a soft chime. The door slid open silently, revealing a staircase descending into darkness. "Piece of cake," Hank muttered. "Now comes the hard part. The descent." The staircase led to a long, dimly lit corridor. The walls were smooth and metallic, humming faintly with energy. Jacob felt a chill run down his spine. It was as if the very air here vibrated with unnatural tension. Lyra moved with purpose, her glowing patterns dimmed to avoid drawing attention. She led them to a ventilation shaft, removing the grate with ease. "This will take us directly above the main production area," she whispered. "Vent shafts," Hank grumbled as he climbed inside. "Classic infiltration move. Love it." The shaft was cramped and suffocating, but it provided a clear view of the facility below. Jacob's breath caught as he peered through the grates. The room was massive, filled with sleek, alien machinery. Dozens of glass tanks lined the walls, each containing a writhing, translucent organism, the Veil parasites. Vanguard agents moved efficiently between consoles, monitoring the production process. "This is worse than I imagined," Lyra said softly, her expression grim. "They're preparing for large-scale deployment." Jacob swallowed hard. "We need to shut this down. Now." Lyra nodded. "There's a central control console near the far end of the room. If we can access it, we can overload the system and destroy the entire facility." "Any chance that doesn't end with us getting vaporized?" Hank asked. "We'll have minutes to escape once the overload begins," Lyra admitted. "But it's the only way." The infiltration. The trio dropped down from the ventilation shaft into a quiet corner of the facility. Lyra's scanner guided them past patrols and security drones, her precision keeping them one step ahead of detection. They reached the control console, a sleek, alien device glowing with pulsating lights. Lyra began working immediately, her glowing hands moving over the console in a blur. "I'll initiate the overload. Cover me." Jacob and Hank took up defensive positions, scanning the room for threats. The hum of the machinery grew louder, and the tanks began to vibrate as the overload process started. "Warning," an automated voice announced. "System integrity compromised. Initiating lockdown protocol." "Here we go," Hank muttered, gripping his modified nail gun. The facility erupted into chaos. Vanguard agents rushed into the room, their weapons blazing. Jacob and Hank fought back, using their makeshift arsenal to hold the line. The tanks began to shatter one by one, the parasites inside writhing and screeching as the system destabilized. "Lyra, how much longer?" Jacob shouted, firing at an advancing agent. "Almost there," she replied, her voice tense. The overload is reaching critical levels. A drone descended toward Lyra, its weapon charging. Jacob sprinted forward, tackling it mid-air and sending it crashing to the ground. Sparks flew as the drone sputtered and died. "Thanks," Lyra said, not looking up. "No problem," Jacob panted, returning to his position. The escape. The room shook violently as the overload reached its peak. "Warning, critical failure imminent. Evacuate immediately. Time to go." Hank yelled, pulling Jacob toward the exit. Lyra locked the final sequence and turned to follow them. The trio sprinted through the facility as explosions erupted around them, the walls cracking and machinery sparking wildly. The hum of the Veil parasites' tanks reached a deafening crescendo before they shattered completely, releasing bursts of energy that lit up the facility like a firestorm. They reached the staircase just as the first wave of explosions ripped through the lower levels. The force of the blast threw them forward, but they managed to scramble to their feet and continue upward. The heat was intense, and the air filled with the acrid scent of burning metal. They burst out of the warehouse just as the structure collapsed behind them, sending a plume of smoke and debris into the sky. The trio collapsed onto the ground, gasping for air. "We did it," Jacob said, his voice hoarse. "For now," Lyra replied, her expression serious. "But this is just one facility. The Vanguard won't stop. Not until they're driven off this planet completely." Hank groaned, sitting up. "Well, next time, maybe we bring a bigger team. Or at least better weapons." Jacob looked at Lyra. Despite the destruction, her glowing patterns were steady, and her gaze was filled with determination. "What's our next move?" Lyra stood, the faint glow of the rising sun reflecting in her eyes. "We take this fight to them. Together." The battle wasn't over, but for the first time, they had struck a blow against the Vanguard. And as they stood amidst the ruins of the facility, Jacob realized they weren't just fighting for survival, they were fighting for humanity's future. The remnants of the Vanguard facility smoldered in the distance, a plume of black smoke rising into the early morning sky. Jacob, Hank, and Lyra stood beside their battered van, catching their breath after the chaos. The victory was hard-won, but its significance was overshadowed by the daunting realization that this was only the beginning. "We bought ourselves time," Lyra said, her voice calm but resolute. "But the Vanguard won't stop. They'll know what we've done, and they'll retaliate with overwhelming force." Hank sighed, running a hand through his graying hair. "So what's the play? Another mad dash into a death trap?" "No," Lyra said, her glowing patterns dimming slightly. "We go after their command center. If we can dismantle their leadership on Earth, we can disrupt their operations long enough to rally humanity against them." Jacob frowned, leaning against the van. "And where exactly is this command center?" Lyra hesitated, then pulled out a small holographic device from her cloak. She activated it, and a map of Earth appeared, marked with faintly glowing points. One of them pulsed ominously near a coastal city. "Here," she said, pointing. "Their base is located beneath the ocean, hidden within a trench. It's heavily fortified and almost impossible to access." "Almost," Hank repeated with a grim chuckle. "I love those odds." Lyra's expression turned serious. "This mission will require every resource we have. There's a high probability we won't make it out alive." Jacob met her gaze, his voice steady. "Then let's make it count." The preparation. The trio spent the next several hours preparing for the mission. Hank, ever resourceful, scavenged the remnants of their equipment to create makeshift explosives and reinforced their weapons. Lyra worked tirelessly to repair the disruptor, enhancing its range and power to serve as their trump card. "This thing's starting to look more like a bomb than a gadget," Hank remarked, eyeing the disruptor as Lyra made the final adjustments. "It is," Lyra said simply. If we can plant it at the core of their base, the resulting pulse will destroy their systems and infrastructure. But it will also destabilize the environment around it. Jacob frowned. Destabilize how? Lyra hesitated. The energy release will cause catastrophic damage. The base, the surrounding area, everything nearby, will be annihilated. Hank let out a low whistle. And we'll be nearby, won't we? There's no other way, Lyra said, her tone soft but resolute. This is the only chance we have to stop them before they escalate their plans. Jacob swallowed hard, his stomach twisting. He glanced at Hank, who gave a small nod, then back at Lyra. We're in. The journey to the depths. Using a stolen Vanguard transport vehicle they had recovered from the facility, the trio approached the ocean trench where the command center was located. The vehicle, equipped with advanced stealth technology, allowed them to evade detection as they descended into the deep. The descent was unnerving. Darkness surrounded them, and the pressure of the ocean depths made the vehicle groan ominously. The only light came from the faint glow of the trench below, where the Vanguard base shimmered like a submerged fortress. This is it, Lyra said, her voice cutting through the tense silence. We'll need to move quickly. Their defenses won't stay dormant for long. As they neared the base, automated turrets and drones began to stir, their sensors scanning the area. Lyra activated the vehicle's cloaking device, maneuvering them into a hidden docking port on the base's outer structure. The trio stepped out into the cold, metallic corridors of the base, their weapons and equipment strapped tightly to their bodies. The air was heavy with the hum of alien machinery, and the faint, rhythmic pulsation of the veil parasites could be felt through the walls. Stay sharp, Jacob whispered, gripping his weapon. No telling what we'll run into. The infiltration. Lyra guided them through the labyrinthine corridors, her scanner leading the way. The base was eerily quiet, save for the occasional patrol of Vanguard agents. The trio moved silently, avoiding detection as they made their way toward the central control room. When they arrived, Lyra stopped and held up a hand. This is it, she said. The core is just beyond these doors. Once we plant the disruptor, we'll have minutes to escape. Great, Hank muttered. Nothing like a good OL countdown to death. Lyra placed her hand on the door's control panel, her glowing patterns syncing with the alien technology. The door slid open, revealing the core, a massive, pulsating sphere surrounded by a web of conduits and machinery. The room was bathed in an eerie blue light, and the air seemed to vibrate with energy. Let's move, Jacob said, stepping forward. As they approached the core, an alarm blared, and the room lit up with red warning lights. The Vanguard had detected their presence. Hostiles inbound. Hank shouted, turning to face the corridor. Vanguard agents poured into the room, their weapons blazing. Jacob and Hank opened fire, holding them off as Lyra worked to secure the disruptor to the core. We don't have time for this. Jacob yelled, ducking behind a console as an energy bolt sizzled past his head. Keep them back. Lyra shouted, her hands moving frantically over the disruptor's controls. I'm almost done. The turning point. As the firefight raged, a towering figure stepped into the room, a Vanguard commander, clad in advanced armor that shimmered like liquid metal. He moved with terrifying speed and precision, disarming Hank with a single strike and pinning Jacob against the wall. You cannot win, the commander said, his voice cold and mechanical. Your resistance is futile. Jacob struggled against the grip, his vision swimming. But before the commander could deliver a killing blow, Lyra intervened, her glowing patterns flaring brightly. She unleashed a surge of energy that sent the commander stumbling back. Get out of here, she shouted at Jacob and Hank. I'll finish this. Jacob's heart sank. No. We do this together. Lyra turned to him, her expression fierce. If I don't stay, the disruptor won't activate in time. You know what needs to be done. Jacob hesitated, his mind racing. He wanted to argue, to find another way, but deep down, he knew she was right. Hank grabbed his arm. "Come on, kid. We don't have a choice." With a heavy heart, Jacob nodded. "Lyra." She cut him off with a small, sad smile. "Go. And remember what we're fighting for. The escape." Jacob and Hank fled the control room as the disruptor began to pulse, its energy building to a critical level. The corridors shook violently as explosions erupted throughout the base, the core's destabilization triggering a chain reaction. They reached the docking port just as the transport vehicle powered up. Hank pushed Jacob inside, slamming the hatch shut as the first wave of explosions consumed the core. The vehicle shot upward, racing toward the surface. Through the viewport, Jacob watched as the Vanguard base imploded, the force of the disruptor's energy tearing it apart. The surrounding trench collapsed, swallowing the remnants of the facility into the ocean's depths. Lyra was gone. The aftermath. Hours later, Jacob and Hank sat in the van, parked on a desolate cliff overlooking the ocean. The sun was setting, painting the sky in hues of orange and red. "She knew what she was doing," Hank said quietly. "She saved us. And maybe a lot more." Jacob stared at the horizon, his hands clenched into fists. "It's not over. The Vanguard's still out there. But Lyra, she gave us a chance." Hank nodded. "Yeah. And now it's up to us to make it count." As the sun dipped below the horizon, Jacob felt a renewed sense of purpose. Lyra's sacrifice had given them more than just survival, it had given them hope. And he wasn't about to let it go to waste. The air was thick with silence as Jacob and Hank stared out at the dark ocean, the weight of Lyra's sacrifice pressing heavily on their shoulders. The Vanguard base was gone, reduced to nothing more than debris at the bottom of the trench. But the war was far from over. Lyra's words echoed in Jacob's mind, filling the void left by her absence. "Remember what we're fighting for." He clenched his fists, anger and determination swirling within him. "We can't stop now," he said, breaking the silence. "Lyra didn't give her life so we could hide. We have to finish this." Hank leaned back against the van, his expression grim but resolute. "Agreed. But if we're gonna take on the rest of the Vanguard, we'll need more than wrenches and duct tape." Jacob nodded, pulling the disruptor's handheld scanner from his pocket. It was damaged in the escape, its glow faint and flickering, but it held Lyra's final gift, a message encoded into its circuits. He turned the device over in his hands, his chest tightening as he activated it. The scanner projected a small, shimmering hologram of Lyra. Her image was faint, her patterns dim, but her voice was strong and steady. "Jacob, Hank," the message began, "if you're seeing this, it means the mission was a success, but I'm no longer with you. I wish there had been another way, but some battles demand everything." Jacob felt a lump rise in his throat, but he didn't interrupt. Lyra's hologram continued, her voice carrying a strange mix of hope and urgency. "The Vanguard is far more dangerous than you realize. The base we destroyed was only one of many. Their presence on Earth is deeply rooted, and their plans are already in motion. But you are not alone. Humanity is capable of extraordinary things when united. You must rally others, scientists, engineers, leaders. Show them the truth and prepare them for what's coming." Hank let out a low whistle. "Rally others, huh?" Easy for her to say. The hologram flickered, and Lyra's expression softened. "Jacob, Hank, you've shown me something I didn't think possible. Courage, resilience, hope. Humanity's spirit is its greatest weapon. Don't let it fade." The projection dimmed, and Lyra's final words hung in the air like a solemn vow. "Fight for your world. Fight for each other. And remember, I'll always be with you." The hologram faded, leaving Jacob and Hank in silence once more. Jacob clenched the scanner tightly, his resolve solidifying. She's right, he said, standing. We can't do this alone. We need to expose the vanguard and build something bigger than ourselves. The plan. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity. Jacob and Hank worked tirelessly to piece together the evidence they had collected, images of the Veil parasites, recordings of vanguard activity, and detailed schematics of their operations. Lyra's disruptor had stored more data than they realized, including maps of other vanguard installations hidden around the globe. They began reaching out to trusted allies, starting with Hank's network of eccentric conspiracy theorists. While many dismissed them as crackpots, a few key figures took notice: scientists intrigued by the evidence, journalists hungry for a story, and even former military personnel with grudges against shadowy operations. One by one, they built a network. Meetings were held in secret, files were shared through encrypted channels, and plans began to take shape. Hank, surprisingly adept at rallying people, became the team's strategist, while Jacob took on the role of spokesperson, using his first-hand experience to inspire others to join their cause. A growing resistance. The resistance grew slowly but steadily. Scientists developed countermeasures to detect and neutralize Veil parasites. Engineers reverse-engineered Vanguard technology to create new weapons and defenses. Hackers infiltrated Vanguard systems, exposing their secrets to the public. The world was starting to wake up. Jacob stood in front of a crowd in an underground bunker, addressing a mix of engineers, soldiers, and ordinary citizens. A projector displayed images of the Vanguard's atrocities, from abducted humans to the Veil's horrifying transformations. This isn't just about one alien or one facility, Jacob said, his voice firm. This is about our future, our survival. Lyra gave her life to give us a chance, and we can't waste it. The Vanguard thinks they can take this planet without a fight. Let's prove them wrong. The room erupted into cheers, the energy palpable. Jacob felt a surge of hope. They were no longer alone. They had become a force to be reckoned with. The Vanguard strikes back. But the Vanguard wasn't idle. Weeks after the destruction of their ocean base, they launched a counteroffensive, targeting resistance cells across the globe. News of disappearances and strange occurrences spread rapidly, fueling fear and uncertainty. One night, as Jacob and Hank coordinated with their allies, an alert blared from their makeshift command center. A Vanguard strike team was en route to their location. They found us, Hank said, his face pale. We've got to move. Jacob grabbed his weapon and the disruptor's scanner. Not this time. We stand and fight. The battle that followed was intense. The Vanguard brought everything they had, drones, agents, and even advanced war machines. But the resistance fought back with ingenuity and determination, using their new technology and tactics to hold the line. In the chaos, Jacob activated the disruptor's scanner, using its residual energy to disable the Vanguard's drones. Hank led the charge, rallying the resistance fighters with his trademark grit and humor. By dawn, the Vanguard forces were defeated, their remnants retreating into the shadows. The resistance had won another battle, but the cost was high. The legacy of Lyra. As the sun rose, Jacob stood amidst the aftermath, surveying the damage. The resistance had held strong, but the fight had taken its toll. He thought of Lyra and the message she had left behind. Her sacrifice had sparked something greater, a movement, a chance for humanity to stand united against an overwhelming threat. Hank approached, his flamethrower slung over his shoulder. Not bad, kid. You're starting to look like a leader. Jacob chuckled weakly. I'm just trying to do what Lyra would have done. Hank nodded, his expression softening. She'd be proud. Hell, I'm proud. Jacob turned to the horizon, determination etched into his features. This isn't over. We've got a lot of work to do. Damn right we do, Hank said, clapping him on the back. Now let's get to it. A new beginning. Months passed, and the resistance grew stronger. The Vanguard's influence began to wane as more of their operations were exposed and dismantled. Humanity, once fragmented and divided, started to unite against the common enemy. Jacob stood in a bustling command center, surrounded by screens displaying operations across the globe. He felt a sense of pride and purpose, knowing they were carrying Lyra's legacy forward. As he watched the Resistance's efforts unfold, a faint glow caught his eye. He looked down to see the Disruptor's scanner flickering softly, as if echoing Lyra's presence. "We're not done yet," Jacob whispered, a small smile forming. "But we're getting there." The fight was far from over, but the tides were turning. And for the first time, Jacob believed they had a real chance, not just to survive, but to win. Humanity's future was in their hands, and they were ready to defend it with everything they had. Thanks for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. For more exciting HFY stories. Your support means the world to us. And make sure to tap the bell icon, so you never miss an update. Stay tuned for our next adventure, and until then, keep exploring the stars. See you in the next video.